Welcome back to the Eutelsat OneWeb 20 mission. We've had a great mission so far. Falcon 9 launched on time at 10:13 p.m. Pacific time from Slick 4 East in Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. We had a successful ascent, fairing separation, and second stage orbital insertion. We also recovered the first stage at landing zone 4, which marked its 7th landing. So we're now seconds away from a second ignition of the MVAC, which will carry the second stage and the OneWeb payload into the orbit necessary to deploy the satellites. This burn will be quick, and it's only going to last a couple of seconds. And it's coming up in about 15 seconds from now.
Good orbit insertion.
And there was a good call out there for good orbit. And as a reminder, the 20 OneWeb satellites are still attached to Falcon 9 second stage. Coming up at about T plus 59 minutes is the start of the payload deploy sequence, which should take a little less than 20 minutes to complete. So we'll be listening for the start of those callouts in a few minutes. So now we're just a couple of minutes away from payload deploy, and our initial burn and orbit insertion put us into an elliptical orbit, which is one where the highest point, the apogee, and the lowest point, the perigee of the orbit, are different. And so it put us into a 175 kilometer by 600 kilometer orbit. And that last short burn that we just saw put us into a circular orbit for payload deployment into a 600 kilometer by 600 kilometer orbit. So it turns out from orbital mechanics that a burn along the direction of travel raises the opposite side of the ellipse, which is why we took that burn at apogee to raise the perigee. So now that we've completed both of those burns today, we are now just a few minutes away from the first payload deploy, where we will be deploying 10 of the satellites, and then we'll be taking a short break and come back for the final 10 satellites on this payload. As a reminder, our customer today is Eutelsat Group, which operates a fleet of 35 geostationary satellites and a constellation of more than 600 satellites in low Earth orbit to deliver broadcast and connectivity services worldwide. The 20 OneWeb LEO satellites launching today were built by Airbus U.S. Space and Defense in Merritt Island, Florida. And once deployed, they will continue to raise their orbit over the coming months and will be integrated into the OneWeb LEO constellation. So we should start seeing deployment of the first 20 Eutelsat of the first 10 of the 20 Eutelsat OneWeb satellites in the next few seconds here.
Sat A4 and A8 have been deployed.
So we just had deployment of the first 2 satellites of this batch of 10, and the next 2 will be deployed in about 30 seconds from now.
Sat A3 and A7 have been deployed.
Good call out there for the next pair that have just deployed. So far we have deployed 4 out of the 10 satellites in this first payload deployment, and we're waiting
Sat
for...
A2 and A6 have been deployed.
And there we just heard the next pair have been deployed, so there's 4 more remaining.
Sat A1 and Sat A5 have been deployed.
Another good call out there. So there are 2 more satellites that remain to be deployed in this initial set of 10. They should be deploying in about a minute.
Sat B4 and B8 have been deployed.
And great call-outs there. So we've now deployed 10 out of the 20 satellites, and we now have a second, roughly 10-minute coast phase, which we're going to take another short break for. And after the coast phase, we'll be back to deploy the remaining 10 satellites just after the T+1 hour and 12-minute mark. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Welcome back to the final portion of the Eutelsat OneWeb 20 mission. So far, we have had a great mission with an on-time launch of Falcon 9 at 10:13 p.m. Pacific Time from Slick 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. We had a successful ascent, fairing separation, and second stage orbital insertion. And we also recovered the first stage at Landing Zone 4 for its 7th landing. And about 10 minutes ago, we deployed the first 10 satellites on today's mission. And now we are about to start deploying the last 10. And similar to the first set of deployments, these will be deployed in pairs. So even though we don't have views of satellite deployment yet, we will still get confirmation over the nets until we regain camera views. So we are currently standing by for those callouts, and we will share them as soon as we hear them. We should be coming up on signal acquisition shortly.
Sat B1 and B5 separation confirmed.
Good callouts there for the first 2 of this batch of 10.
Sat Sat B2 and B6 separation confirmed.
And a great view of that pair deploying. So far we've now deployed a total of 14 of the 20 satellites aboard today's mission. We have an awesome view on our screen right now, but even if we lose views of satellite deployment, we will still continue to get confirmation.
Sat C1 and C5 separation confirmed.
And another 2 have deployed, and we got an awesome view of that deployment as well. So now there are 4 more satellites that remain to be deployed, and we have successfully deployed 16 out of the 20 so far. The satellites that you see on your screen right now were built by
Sat B3 and B7 separation confirmed.
Another successful deployment of 2 more satellites. These satellites were built by Airbus US Space and Defense in Merritt Island, Florida. And so now there are the final 2 satellites that remain to be deployed from the set of 20.
Sat C3 and C7 separation confirmed.
So with the final 2 on their way, we can confirm successful deployment.
Deployed.
We can now confirm successful deployment of all 20 spacecraft on today's mission. And that wraps up our coverage for today. Today's launch concludes our 99th successful launch this year and our 394th overall. All of us here at SpaceX want to give a huge thanks to our customer, Eutelsat Group, for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to thank the Range and the Federal Aviation Administration for their support. Be sure to follow us at SpaceX on X for upcoming launch updates. And to all of our viewers, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.